Hi there, I'm Mrs F, and this is my video on Nazi policies towards the young. I'm following the Edexcel specification, but a lot of the content is also relevant to other exam boards. So, this is the second of my lessons on life in Nazi Germany, looking at policies towards the young, and in particular focusing on the youth groups and education. The youth were very important to Hitler because he wanted them to be the long-term security of his Third Reich. And he felt that even if some adults didn't believe in Nazi ideas, if children were taught from a young age to believe, they would follow him no matter what. And in a speech he gave in 1933, he said, "When an opponent declares, 'I will not support you,' I calmly say, 'Your child belongs to us already. How important are you? You will soon be gone. Your children, however, now stand in our camp.'" So his main aims were to create proud Germans who supported a strong independent Germany, to create supporters of the Nazi Party and believers in his policies, and to create strong and healthy children so that the girls would become healthy, fertile mothers and the boys would be productive workers and strong soldiers. Before Hitler came to power, there were lots of different German youth groups for boys and girls. Some were run by other political parties like the Social Democrats, and some were church groups. The Nazis set up their own youth sections in the 1920s, but they were small in comparison with other groups. For example, in 1932, there were 600,000 youth in the Protestant church youth groups, but only 100,000 in the Nazi Party youth groups. So after 1933, Hitler tried to get control over the youth as much as possible. First of all, he banned almost all other youth groups, apart from the Catholic youth groups, in 1933, and even those he shut down in 1936. Coincidentally, the same year that all sports facilities for young people were taken over by the Hitler Youth. So basically, if you wanted to use the facilities, then you had to join the Hitler Youth. And then in March 1939, it was compulsory for all young Germans to join youth groups from the age of 10. And only groups that the Nazis didn't want, like the Jews, were not able to join the youth group. As you can see from the table, Nazi youth groups were strictly segregated by both age and by gender. Boys wore military-style uniforms and were trained to be future soldiers. Girls wore a uniform of a blue skirt, white blouse and heavy marching shoes. In their youth groups, they were trained to be future wives and mothers. Some of the activities for boys and girls were the same. Both groups had to sit through political indoctrination. For example, they had to attend residential courses and rallies where they were taught about Nazi ideas. They also had to swear an oath of loyalty to the Führer, saying, "I devote all my energies and strength to the saviour of our country, Adolf Hitler. I am willing and ready to give up my life for him. So help me God." Both groups also had physical and character-building activities. For example, there were regular camping and hiking expeditions. And there was also regional and national sports competitions. However, there were also some key differences. The Hitler Youth was organised to train young German boys to become useful to the state, either as workers or as in the armed forces, so military training was essential. Members practiced skills useful to troops, such as map reading and signalling. By 1938, 1.2 million boys in the Hitler Youth were being trained in small arms shooting, like you can see in the picture. There were separate military divisions of the Hitler Youth for specialist training, including the naval, motor, gliding and flying Hitler Youth. Hitler himself said that his programme for the Hitler Youth was hard and that weakness must be hammered away. He said, "I want a brutal, domineering, fearless, cruel youth." And so Hitler Youth members were plunged into ice-cold water to toughen them up, forced to undergo lengthy exercises in wintry weather, or they were given harsh punishments for errors or disobeying orders. Girls, on the other hand, were being trained to be good housewives and mothers, so they were trained to cook, iron, make beds, and to sew. And girls were also taught the importance of something called racial hygiene, the idea that they should keep the German race pure by only marrying Aryan men, the Nazis believing that the Aryan race was superior to all others. In 1934, Bernhard Rust, the man you see on the screen, was made Education Minister. He was a bit of an odd choice. Although he had been a school teacher, he actually lost his job in 1930 after he was accused of having a sexual relationship with a student. And he was also regarded as mentally unstable due to a severe head injury he'd suffered in World War I. But what this shows is as long as you were loyal to Hitler, you didn't have to be particularly competent. Now, Bernhard Rust believed that schools were the best way of controlling the views of young Germans, and he said that the whole purpose of education is to create Nazis. So in the 1930s, he made a series of changes to bring schools under the control of the Nazis, and he started with the teachers. The law for the restoration of the professional civil service in 1933 allowed the Nazis to sack any head teachers and teachers that they disapproved of. In just one state, Prussia, Rust sacked over 180 secondary head teachers. All teachers were made to swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler and had to join the Nazi Teachers League, which ran political education courses for teachers over the summer months, setting out the ideas which they should support. By 1939, over 200,000 teachers had attended the courses. And then there was the fact that pupils were encouraged to inform the authorities if teachers did not teach and support Nazi ideas. From 1935, all new textbooks had to be approved by the Nazis. And new history textbooks appeared which taught the stab-in-the-back myth about how Germany lost World War I. And they also promoted Germany's previous greatness, whilst new biology textbooks taught about Aryan supremacy and anti-Semitism. You can see a couple of examples on the right-hand side of the screen. At the top there is an anti-Semitic German children's book called Trust No Fox in the Green Meadow and No Jew on His Oath, where you see some horrible stereotypes of Jews according to the Nazis. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see a maths exercise entitled, "What is the cost of care for the hereditary sick?" And this was designed to teach young children that disabled people were a burden on the state. Finally, Mein Kampf was made a compulsory school text. The Nazis also took control of the school curriculum. A new subject called eugenics was added. In this subject, German children were taught how to classify racial groups and were told that Aryans were superior and should not marry inferior races like the Jews. Traditional subjects, like maths, were downgraded in importance and changed to make them more useful to the kind of society Nazis wanted, like we saw in that exercise on the previous slide. The amount of time spent on PE and sport was doubled. This was to create strong workers, soldiers, and healthy mothers. The curriculum was different for boys and girls. For example, domestic science, including cookery and needlework, became compulsory for girls to make them better wives and mothers. There was also political indoctrination, with pupils having to gather in school halls to listen to major political speeches on the radio. and every lesson would start and end with the Heil Hitler salute. So let's look at how successful the Nazis were. In some ways they were successful. 7 million joined the Hitler Youth movement, which was the majority of the youth in Germany. And most young people did not oppose the Nazis. Some even went so far as denouncing their teachers or parents to the Gestapo. For example, a 38-year-old teacher in Dusseldorf told a joke to her class of 12-year-olds which was a bit critical of Hitler. One of the children told his parents, and they told the Gestapo, which meant that she immediately lost her job and was sent to prison for 3 weeks. The Nazis were successful in ending most rival organisations, such as the Catholic Youth Movement in 1936. And I think we could say that overall, young people were the most easily attracted to the regime and became some of its most active supporters. They enjoyed the activities like camping and felt it was a chance to reject the authority and values of their parents. They also liked the idea of comradeship, which was promoted in the Hitler Youth. But of course, we know that the Nazis were not completely successful. As we learned in one of my previous lessons, some young people established their own rival youth groups, like the Swing Kids and the Edelweiss Pirates, and therefore rejected Nazi expectations. We might also say that particularly with the slightly older children, so kind of secondary age, indoctrination tended to reinforce existing beliefs, but was less successful in getting young people to accept new ideas. And really crucially, I think we can say that young people became more disillusioned with the youth movements as the years passed. To begin with, it was voluntary to join these groups, and they quite enjoyed some of the activities. But when it was made compulsory, this put a lot of children off, because who likes being forced to do something? It no longer gives you a sense of freedom. And the repetitive marching and monotonous propaganda took the fun out of it, particularly as we get nearer to World War II and the Nazis are more consciously preparing for war. So over time, more and more young people resented having to take part in the activity. So now that we've finished looking at policies towards women and policies towards the young, we're now going to have a look at the workers and living standards. So next lesson, we're going to focus in particular on unemployment. Thank you, and I'll hopefully catch you next week.